Bienvenidos, Hushamdi, and welcome to this HUD 8 networking Techtorial on parsing JSON data with Python. This is part 2 in what is going to be a multi-part series, and this is inextricably linked to the DevNet Associate DevASC 200-901 exam. In part 1 of the video, we looked at the exam blueprint and we saw that not only is parsing data with Python or JSON data with Python part of the exam blueprint, but also being able to differentiate between the different data formats that we might see, like JSON or XML or YAML, that is also one of the exam objectives. And so this series is being put together to get you started and get you using Python to parse JSON data. Now, as a quick review, we talked about a number of key concepts in the first video. We talked about what REST, R-E-S-T, stands for, Representational State Transfer. And we talked about the fact that it's not a programming language. Think of REST as like a framework that defines how web services interoperate. Now, services that conform to this standard or this framework are considered to be RESTful. And so how do we meet the standard to be able to say that our MapQuest API, the application programming interface, how can we say that that's RESTful? Well, it's got a base URI, Uniform Resource Indicator, right? Remember, a URL is just a type of URI. It's got standard HTTP method support like GET and POST, and we're using GET with the Route API. And then it supports some kind of media type. And from the previous video, we looked at the JSON IETF RFC. And we saw that JSON is a media type. So the MapQuest API has a base URI, it supports the standard HTTP methods, and it supports media types like JSON. Therefore, it is considered to be RESTful in terms of the services that it can provide and the interoperability that it can provide. Now, we also talked about the fact that HTTP is the most common request format, and that's actually what we're using. And when I say HTTP, I'm including HTTPS in there with the secure sockets layer. So HTTP, HTTPS, and the GET, the PUT, the head, delete, post, the different types of methods that are supported with HTTP. Now, another thing that's very important to remember is that this entire conversation that we're seeing take place here between our Python application and the RESTful MapQuest API is stateless, meaning that no state information is being maintained on either side of this conversation. It's literally, think of it like just a hit and run. I'm asking for some data and I'm asking for it in JSON format, and then I'm getting that data, and then that's it. The conversation is over. And then we also talked about JSON View, an extension for our Google Chrome browser. Now, this is going to become very important because in this video, here is what we're going to be covering. We're actually now going to dig into that JSON data. We're going to take a look at how we access the JSON objects. Remember, JSON objects look like Python dictionaries. And then we're going to see that we access those objects and the values of those objects as if we're using Python lists to get at that data. And so in this video, we're going to be digging into the JSON data. We're going to be parsing the data, dragging the status code out. And then we're going to make our application, our Python application, interactive. We're going to remove the hard-coded destination, or I should say starting location and then destination locations, and we're going to be prompting the user for input. And then that's where we're going to cut off here on part 2 of this video. So let's get back onto the command line and let's take a look at the Python application that we have currently. And again, here is the API key that I am using. And if you go back to the first video, you can see how you can get your own key. Or if you wanted to type all of this out, you could probably go ahead and use this key. We've got our URL. Remember, we mashed together the base API URL for MapQuest, which is this value right here. And we mash it together using this urllib.parse module and the method URL encode. And what do we pass to it? Well, we pass it a dictionary as an argument with key value pairs. So we give it our MapQuest API key. We give it our from location, our start location. We give it our to destination value, which right now is Santa Rosa, California and San Francisco, California. And I added some spaces and commas in here to show you that we could actually put an entire address in here, which I will be using when we go to prompt ourselves or the user for that information. And then we get a JSON we get a response back. We've created a variable called JSON response. And into that variable, we are requesting via HTTP GET. Here is the URL, which again, we just created right up here with all of our parameters. And we're telling Python, give that back to me in JSON format. Now, I print out the JSON response, and I also print out the URL. So let's rerun this real briefly here and let's see what we get. And this is going to lead us over to Google Chrome, because as I look at this right here, this is really not human readable. And this is one of the intimidating aspects of some of these common data formats like XML or JSON or YAML. Again, it's just a format in which the response is being given back to you. That's what YAML, JSON, and XML are all about. And they all go about it a different way. And so here's what we get back in terms of the JSON information, that JavaScript object notation. Now, you can see that we have our entire URL here. But this doesn't do us much good because it's very difficult to look in here and pick things out. So let's transition back to the Google Chrome web browser. And all I did up here was cut and paste that URL I printed up at the end. I printed up the URL that we created, and you can see that's exactly what we've got right here, and I pasted it into the Google Chrome browser with the JSON View plugin installed. So here is our first JSON object. It's the route object. And you can see the little ... here means that if I expand this out, there's quite a bit of information in here. Now, we're going to start with something a little easier to look at, with a little less information, because once I show you how to do this, you're going to be able to go into any JSON object using Python and rip out or parse the data that you're really interested in. And so we're interested in the status code, and specifically, I'm going to be checking to see if the status code equals 0. Because if the status code equals 0, that means that this call is successful. Anything other than 0 for the status code means that it was a failure. So here's where the rubber meets the road. We can see here the top level name of this JSON object is called info. And underneath info is status code. So in order for us to access this using Python, what we're going to do is we're going to use the format of a Python list. So let's go back to the command line here. Let's pull up our program one more time, vi directions.py, and I'm going to come down here to after we printed that statement up. And in fact, I'll do a little comment in here and I'll say, check status code of call to RESTful API. So how do we do that? Well, just like in Python, just like we do in Python, we're going to create a variable that's going to hold that returned status. So I'm going to say returned underscore status. Now, what are we returning? And this is where we're parsing the data. So this is what is going to go after that JSON response data. So I'm going to say JSON underscore response. Now remember, that variable is currently holding, oops, sorry, I wanted to come over to the browser here, is currently holding all of this information, the route object and the info object. And here is what it all looks like down here in the bottom, right? So it's that Python variable that we've created is holding all of this information. Well, remember, this information looks like a dictionary, but here's how we're going to approach getting the information out of there. So I'm going to say JSON response, and then I'm going to say I want the info object, and then underneath the info object, I'm interested in status code. And that is exactly how you parse or rip out the information that we're interested in. I've got the top level object name here, info, and the status code here. And again, this looks just like if we were accessing elements in a Python list. And so we can now pull that information out, and let me go ahead and print the returned underscore status. And that's going to print out the returned status for us. Now, let me make sure that, because we're going to have a string returned. So actually, let me show you. So I'm sorry, we're going to have an integer gets returned, but we're going to want to print this value in a sentence probably as a string. So let's save this program, and now let's run the program again, and let's see what we get at the very, very bottom here. And there we go, right? And returned, did I misspell return status? So that's probably what I did. Again, fortuitous failure, returned RETURNED underscore, I misspelled status here, SATUS. There we go. All right. So let's go ahead, rerun the program with everything spelled properly here, and we're going to see at the very bottom, we get this 0. Right now, by itself, that doesn't make much sense. So let's go in and let's clean that up a bit. And this is where I'm saying that we're going to be printing that out. We're going to be printing a statement out here. And let me actually throw in a print function here. And let's put one at the bottom here to separate things out. So here's what I would really like to say. And in fact, let's make sure that we check. So if returned underscore status is equal to 0, right? So we've got this if then kind of construct here. So if that value, the return status value, is equal to 0, we're going to print out, and let me go ahead and say right here, let's go into input mode, and we're going to say the status of your API call was, and this is where we'll end the string. We're going to concatenate this value here, and I need to convert that returned status into a string because I'm concatenating a string with a string. I cannot concatenate a string to an integer, or we would get an error message. And let's go ahead and pull that back there to make sure we don't have any errors. And so we're basically going to print out the status of your API call was, and it's going to give us the status of 0. So let's see what that looks like. And let's rerun this program again here. And there we go. And at the very end, and do I have another typo in here? And I misspelled status again. I apologize. Having some spelling challenges here this morning. If return status, and there it is right there. I did it again. All right, so there we go. And let me make sure I spelled it right on the other side, and we did. All right, so we get the bonus lab here, which is spelling today. And there we go. The status of your API call was 0. And so that means it was a success. And it's only going to print that out if it was a success. If not, we're going to get an error message, and that's what we would end up seeing. So now let's take the final step here. Now that we know how to parse that data, and we know how to dig in there and pull out that status code value. And if I step back here, remember, that is what we're pulling out. What if I wanted to print out the copyright information, and maybe I just want to put this copyright map quest in here. So let's spice things up a little bit here. How would I do that? Well, it would be the info object underneath the copyright object, and I'm looking for the image alt text, which is that text right there. And in fact, I'll just pull the text right here. So what would that look like if I wanted to add the printing of that to my program? Let's parse the JSON data. So let me come all the way down here, and I'm only going to print that up. And actually, let's go ahead and say mapQuest underscore, and what are we calling that? And let's just call it copyright. Copyright. Is that how you spell that? Yeah, copyright. All right. Paying attention to spelling here. So how do we get that? Well, it's the JSON response, right? And we're going to now dig into that JSON response. We're going to go to the info object, and then under the info object, we're going to grab copyright, and then under copyright, we're going to grab text. Whoops, let's put it in double quotes there. Text. And there we go. And then all I would need to do is come down here, and after I print my status API call 1, 2, 3, let's go ahead and print, and I'm simply going to put in here mapQuest underscore copyright. And it should print that text. So let's save this, let's clear the screen, and now let's rerun our program. And we have again parsed the data. And so that's how you get to this data with the little copyright sign. It's info, copyright, text. If I wanted to print the image URL, right, it would be info, copyright, image URL. And that is parsing JSON data using Python. That is how simple it is. So now that we've done a easy and very basic type of parsing of this JSON data, now let's go ahead and add in some interoperability here, right? Because right now, the application doesn't really make much sense because I've got this, I can only do one thing, and that is when I run it, it's going to give me the hard-coded start location and then the hard-coded destination location as my start and finish points. So Santa Rosa, California and San Francisco, California. And so what if I wanted to prompt the user for the information instead of hard coding it in here? Well, let's do that. I'm going to simply comment this out. We'll leave those lines in there. Let's comment this out. And we're going to come down under API key. And this is where I'm going to say while true. Now, this means pretty much forever, right? Until I say otherwise. So we're going to say while true, and then 2, 3, let's go 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to go ahead and say start underscore destination is going to be input. And again, we're using the input function to prompt the user for input. And I'm going to say, please enter your starting location. Right? And we read that into the variable called start destination, sorry, start location. So let me change that real quickly here. So we'll change this to start location. So that's my start location. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put in my destination. So we're going to prompt the user for two things. So enter your destination location. So we're prompting the user for the starting location. We're prompting the user for the destination location. But now we've got one more thing that we need to take care of here. Our indentation. Whoops, didn't want that J there. right? We want to indent everything under this while statement. And that includes all of this information here, right? Let's come over here. And there we go. All right, and so let's clean this up down here at the bottom. I typically at the bottom scripts, I'll in here, whoops, get rid of that. End of file. So there we go. So now we've added this while loop in here. No way to break out of it yet. We're going to deal with that later. But what we're looking at right now is the entire program here, and we're going to be prompting for the start location and the destination. So let's see what this looks like, and let's make sure we don't have any spelling mistakes or typos in here. And I do apologize for that. So Python 3 directions.py, enter your starting location, and I'm going to put my home address in here as a child, 3620 Oregon Drive, Santa Rosa, California, 95405. Now, you take a look at that. I've put the entire complete address in there. And let's see how we get this information mashed together, encoded into a URL when it prints it out. Please enter my destination location. And here I'm just going to say San Francisco, California. I don't know a zip code, so we'll leave it as it is. And there's my JSON data. Here is my entire application running. We've got the status call of 0. We've parsed out this data here to get the MapQuest information for the copyright. And more importantly, there is the URL that I'm sending to the MapQuest RESTful API in order to get back this response so that I can go in here and dig the information out that I'm interested in, right? And right now, in this video, we were taking a look at the status call, the status of the API call, as well as the copyright information. And all you'd have to do is take that URL, let's copy it, let's come back over here, and let's paste it in. Let's hit enter. And there's my route JSON object. There's my info JSON object. And that is all of our information. And so now in the next video, we're going to be going a little bit deeper. We're going to be adding in a way to break out of this application, because right now, take a look at what it's going to do here. It's going to continue to run. So I'll say Baltimore and then Towson, Maryland. Let's see if it gives us the information here. And so there we go. We get that information and it keeps running. So we're going to add in, excuse me, a way to break out of this while loop. And then we're also now going to look at the route JSON data object, and we're going to see how we can parse out the interesting information there. What about the time of the travel, the distance, the amount of fuel that is being used? And so we're going to look at how we would pull or parse that JSON data to get those values that are going to be important to us. All right, well, this is going to wrap up part 2 of parsing JSON data with Python. You saw just how easy it is to use Python to parse JSON data. And now we're well on our way to becoming self-sufficient and being able to interface with other RESTful API web services applications like the MapQuest API to go and get that JSON data and then to rip through it and parse out the information that's important to us. All right, thanks so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying this series, and I hope to see you in the next video.